Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So today I'm taking another dive into this topic that I've really been fascinated with for the last few years. And it's always intriguing for me because I like to look at it from what the Brazilians are saying, what the studies are saying that's coming out of Brazil. I don't like to just take studies that are coming out of, say, the UK or the United States and just assume that it applies exactly perfectly to Brazil. And one thing that I notice a lot in Brazil's media, a lot of the articles that you'll get online, you have a lot that are specifically speaking on studies coming out of Brazil, but they'll often cite articles that have been released or published in the United States or the UK, for example. And, I never like to analyze a situation and just assume that because this is true in this country or that country, or, globally, just to see, I don't want to assume that this is absolutely true in another country just because the study came out in this country or that country, or it's a global study. For the most part, a lot of these studies could be valid wherever you go. And some of them are just going to have these, these little nuances that make particular countries and cultures, it might be a little bit different. For many years, a lot of Brazilians who I've read material, whether it's comments or stuff coming out of academia, conversations on social networks or whatever, people will often say, like, you can't necessarily apply how race is perceived in the United States in the exact same way and apply it to Brazil and think it's going to explain the situation perfectly because, there are these nuances and differences. So this is something that I wanted to consider, in my dealings with Brazil over more than 2 decades. The question of relationships, women and men, has come up from time to time. Well, I'm not going to say time to time. It's come up a lot over the years. But, as I was focused so much on the racial aspect, a lot of things that I think could explain this dynamic of race can also be, I think it should be studied, at the same time as, issues of gender, issues of relationships, how men and women relate to each other. So that's something that, as I've said several times, is something that I wanted to explore more. And as I just started diving into this topic, I'm finding just like a plethora of material to go over, and I know that, a lot of people are finding interest in traveling to Brazil, particularly, I heard a report a few days ago that says, the numbers of Americans seeking passports has gone up exponentially. Have to wonder why that is. Of course, I have some of my own ideas, but I don't want to make any assumptions. But we do know that a lot of American men are perhaps seeking, companionship with women outside of the United States for various reasons. So with this interest, that's something that I wanted to take a closer look at some of these topics and how it applies to Brazil. So today's piece is called, "Why Don't Men Approach Women They Are Interested In? Is It Women's Fault?" So without this grand introduction, I just want to get right into this article tonight and see what's being said. So today I wanted to discuss a topic that has come up from time to time in the comments section of this channel. With the increase of American men seeking to attain a passport, some in search of a particular woman with whom to develop a serious relationship, some participating in sexual tourism, and some just being fed up with the grind that is life in the United States. For those who seek female companionship or more, the question often leads to, what are foreign women in general like, and specifically, what are Brazilian women like? Men want to know if Brazilian women are somehow better than American women, or, are they easier to get along with? I've also seen comments on videos I've done about feminism in Brazil, ranging from, if they only knew the destruction of this perverse ideology, to I was thinking about going to Brazil, but no longer. And this is a big mistake. Black Brazil has no hope. So judging from the comments, you can kind of see how it is some readers of this channel feel in relation to the feminist movement. Now, I had done a video some time back that just basically said the Black population in Brazil identifies more with the feminist movement in terms of both men and women than the overall Brazilian population, which is where part of this, some of these comments are coming from. On the other hand, when the discussion is about the question of palmitagem, which is defined as a predilection for white partners within Brazil's Black population, some readers want to know what it is Brazilian men are saying about Brazilian women. It's just to say that a lot of the videos that I've done have presented the women's side of the of this accusation. Do Black Brazilian men just openly prefer white Brazilian women? Is this the case? And people want to know, okay, we've heard from what the women are saying. The women are pointing the finger saying, these Black men have abandoned us. They're running over us to get over to white women. Now, some Black Brazilian men have spoken on this. And a lot of people are just participating in discussions on relationships in general, which is, as more this conversation goes on, I mean, there's plenty I could go through right now as it is. I want to introduce more of this to my own audience so people can get a feel for what people are saying in Brazil. Well, to say the least, there is a lot being said about Brazilian women, courtesy of Brazilian men. I did an interview with a Brazilian guy, I don't know, probably about a month and a half ago. And, a lot of people checked out that video because he was just explaining his own interpretation of how so many American men think they're going to just get on a plane to Brazil and think they're going to just find the perfect woman that they're looking for. And it doesn't quite work that way. We all have our little quirks, our preferences, things that we don't like. And no matter what country you go to, you're going to run into that. So there was this situation a few months back where African-American male had basically got ran out of the country. And I feel like, I explained this in a previous video. Like, I think for everything that was being said, it was a little bit right and a little bit wrong about what everybody was saying. All parties had something right and something wrong about what went down with that particular guy. So keep in mind, this is the opinion of some of the men. Much has been said about, like what feminists are saying, what is the women's movement all about? And they've been very vocal about how they see things. So the thing that I've come to learn over the years is that it's not necessarily that something is absolutely true just because, say, a majority of people believe that it's true. I've said this often. Some of the things that I've learned when looking at like the call for Black equality in the United States, what are leftist organizations that's supposed to represent the Black population, what are they saying? What's true? What's myth? What's a myth? And then what's the other side saying? So this is something that I wanted to carry over into this other topic that I want to explore. Because, in studying a lot of the racial stuff that was coming out of Brazil over the last few decades, a lot of the stuff that I was reporting on, translating, it was coming out of like feminist organizations. And it's not the fact that I was following Black feminism per se. It's just that Black Brazilian women seemed like they had organized, what their struggle was all about, what their demands were. And following the racial aspect of it, it made me look into the gender aspect, say, okay, well, what are these women saying? And they've been very vocal about this, as I just said. But I want to know, what is the other side saying? What are men in general in Brazil saying about, this issue of how relationships are going these days? There's been a number of reports that have come out talking about how divorces have exploded in Brazil. They've gone up at least the last 5 to 10 years, and they got even worse just during the whole pandemic. So, there's a lot to unpack here. So let me just keep on going with this article here. Some people will automatically reject what these men have to say. But as I've often said, we must be able to hear both or all sides and come to some conclusion about whatever the topic is. It's funny, but For so many years, my focus on first the blog and then my YouTube channel was simply the racial situation. Along the way, I would approach the question of relationships only as far as it touched on the question of race. What I have discovered along the way is the necessity of digging a little deeper into relationship questions, what the men think of women, because the women have made their voices very much heard, and how Brazilian men and women interact with each other. To be real, to have a fair assessment of what's going on between Black Brazilian men and women, I've concluded that I needed to explore relationships in general, as questions of sex and gender will reveal a lot, because relationships as a whole do affect Black men and women, because regardless of the race question, men will be men and women will be women. As I followed the discussion in the American manospheres for some time, as well as what many Black feminists were saying in Brazil, added to the fact that so many men are interested in knowing more about Brazilian women, I thought it would be a natural progression to explore these and other related topics. Up to this point, I've got to say that it has been definitely well worth the dive. I've long believed that although countries may be different due to culture and language differences, I would expect that men and women would have some of the same attributes regardless of country and culture. In fact, the more I dig, the more I talk to people, the more material I read, the more I conclude that this is true. But before I go any further, I must also reveal that as I am not Brazilian, similar to the way that my blog is formatted, I wanted to hear what Brazilians, specifically in this case men, were saying about this and other topics. The conversation is ongoing online. For today's piece, I explored one of my favorite sites where people have open discussions about whatever topic, and that's the website called Quora. I'm sure at least some of you are familiar with the site's format. Someone posts a question and whoever is interested in responding does so. If you didn't know, you can find thousands of conversations going on in Quora in various languages. As I want to know what the Brazilians are saying about various topics, I'll be reading and translating from the original Portuguese. So today I'll be checking out how a few Brazilian men responded to the question. Por que os homens não se aproximam mais de mulheres que eles estão interessados? A culpa é das mulheres. Which means, why don't men approach women they are interested in? Is it women's fault? So with that title, if you're a reader in Portuguese, you can read Portuguese. You can just, put this in Google, type that in, and it should probably take you over to the exact Quora conversation where this question was asked. So I have two texts that I'm going to highlight here. The first one is by a guy named Walber Galeto. And again, he's answering the question, his own personal take on this question. Why don't men approach women they are interested in? Is it women's fault? So he says, not necessarily. But today there is a culture that demonizes everything masculine and treats men as if they were to blame for everything bad that happens on earth. This ends up inhibiting eventual male approaches. In my case, I had a problem that lasted for years and was related to trauma in his adolescence. Every time I approached a woman, I had such physiological reactions of dread that I simply froze up. I was lucky that I didn't have bad looks. So practically all the girlfriends I had until I was 25 or 26 were because they took the initiative since I couldn't do it. Basically, he's saying that, the women approached him. Continuing, many men go through this, and not being able to make the initial approach becomes a vicious circle or cycle, because most women, even if they don't want to admit it, want the initiative to come from the man. It took me years to overcome this problem. And today there is a factor that aggravates things like this. Liberal feminism has grown a lot, as with any extremist movement on the internet. Younger women today hate men because from a very young age, they are reading and hearing all day long on the internet that men are bad, that everything they do is bad, that they have no respect for women, that they are always abusive, and so on. Approaching a woman has become really difficult and complex, because most of them simply react aggressively to any man who approaches her or who she is not interested in. And this ends up making those men with a little more difficulty even more withdrawn. Not to mention the risk of being accused of harassment just for a misplaced word, since a woman who accuses a man of harassment cannot even be challenged, no matter how absurd her account is. The result of this is that the situation always gets worse because in a context like this, the winner is the man with the narcissistic personality who learns to act that way. He learns to act the way that works and is not afraid to approach women. And the man who stands out less gets worse and worse and more afraid to approach women. In my case, I'm 40 years old, and lately I'm even too lazy to talk to women who are 25 years old or less. Most of them spit hatred at men 24 hours a day, are coy to an astounding degree, and have the head of a teenager because they were raised by their family and indoctrinated by liberal feminists to be like that. Of course, there are exceptions, but I particularly don't have the patience to be called a pedophile harassing uncle in a big text on the internet by an infantilized person at the age when my mother was already raising two children and doing everything that liberal feminists today say women don't do. And I prefer not to take the risk. Most of the time, I only really approach a younger woman when she practically jumps into my lap. I'm interested, but since they don't want to learn to separate the wheat from the chaff and think that only their disappointments in love are valid, then let them experience their hatred with some abusive scumbag the way they like it or alone. The truth is that the radicalization that the internet is causing in people is making human relationships more and more difficult and aggravating more and more problems that already existed. I don't really think there's much I need to add to this. I feel like a lot of what he said is a lot. I think according to what he's describing and what he's feeling about interactions between men and women, his own experiences, what he's seen, I see a lot in common with what a lot of men, regardless of race, are saying in the United States. A lot of people have made this point of how things are blowing up on the internet is taking away the human aspect of relations, uh, interest of people. I got out of the dating game long before you had anything like, Tinder or any of these dating apps. And, from what I'm understanding, people it's I don't know, it's kind of like it's taking a personal touch out of relationships. It sounds to be there's a lot of hookup culture going on. And this is something that you hear from Brazil too, this whole thing of ficar, this type of thing where, I'm with you tonight, and but that might be it. So this is something that a lot of people are saying that these dating apps, this is what's leading to, which is going to cause, I think, a lot of problems in the future because, with divorce rates, just exploding, people not knowing how to interact with each other, certain standards that people have and looking for a mate that just may be a little bit extreme, maybe, how could we say, just out of their reach. Men being frustrated with the whole dating scene and what the demands of like women's movements are saying. So you get that a lot from this article that I just read. That's definitely it compares very well. It lines up to what a lot of American men are saying. So this is something that I think people should give it an ear. Listen to what these people are saying, because American men coming to Brazil, they're Americans. I think there's a big mistake, and I've said this in previous videos, that people just think they're going to jump on a plane and just meet quality women by going to Brazil, and oftentimes ending up with, girls who might be, pay for play, they might be open prostitution, they might be turning tricks. And, as the guy said on one of my previous videos, the Brazilian guy who spoke on this was like, look, you have these tourist traps where, American men and foreign men from other countries are welcome because these women are playing for pay. So these are some things that people should understand. I pointed this out when I was talking about, Austin Holloman, a couple months ago. And I just said, I think he made some mistakes because I don't think he knew necessarily what the atmosphere was in Brazil these days. The growth of the internet, the growth of the feminist movement in Brazil. So there's going to be a lot of pushback. There's going to be a lot of accusations that may or may not be true. And these are things that people should be aware of, before they jump on a plane and come to Brazil and just think everything is completely different. Anyway, so Luis Eduardo Figueiredo, he answered this same question asking, is this women's fault? Why don't men approach women they are interested in? And is this, the fault of women? So this is Luis Eduardo Figueira. So this is his response to the question. I see so many factors that I can't even organize them properly in my mind. One of the factors is the inversion of the male-female roles in conquest and choice, or something close to an inversion. There are many more women than men, and they end up competing for a small portion of these men who inevitably become cynical. Where have we heard that before? This idea that a large group of women are looking for only a couple of the men that they consider to be attractive, or what do they say, high value, the type of men that they're trying to go after. It's like every woman wants that particular man. And then the men who don't, fall under the category of what they call high value, they're simply ignored. So as you can see from this statement that he's making, he sees something very similar there. These women end up competing for a small proportion of these men who inevitably become cynical. The false culture that women like sensitive men. In poor communities, it is more evident the preference that women have for a minority of the most aggressive guys in the neighborhood. Low resistance to frustration and a very high tendency to use force, including lethal force. Aggressiveness has to be assimilated into a man's personality in a certain visible way as an ally. But most men are too, quote unquote, nice. Many of them end up revealing afterwards a narcissistic character that only knows how to pretend to be nice and reveal intolerance at the first contradiction. That is, men are avoiding manifesting aggressiveness, losing an important part of the masculine identity that women desire, and end up seeing the most interesting women competing for a minority of inevitably cynical guys. This is, he said a lot right here. I was looking at one particular article a little while ago, and I can't remember the exact title, but it was something to the effect of like women are digging men who are like half gay or somewhat gay, whatever that's supposed to mean. But it made me think of some searches that I was doing about the discussion of Black masculinity in Brazil. And that's something that's an article that one of these days I want to have to get to it, because this is another thing that a lot of American men are saying. And I'm finding that a lot of Brazilian men are asking the same question. Why does it seem like the type of men that Brazilian women claim that they want is going to be a little bit more on the feminine side? And that's going to be the question. The question we're having in American society now, like, where are all the real men now? All the men are becoming feminized. With the alphabet community pushing more and more, they're pushing this idea that they're trying to, let's move the goalposts on what masculinity is supposed to represent and what is, quote unquote, acceptable masculinity. So in some ways, this is what this guy is saying here. There's other, like I said, as I cover more of this, you're going to hear more and more of these opinions that seem to line up with some of the things that men are saying in the United States. But let's keep going. The radicalism that feminism has become, assimilating the safety to make conversation with attractive women, requires trial and error until it starts to work. From there, I don't need to say anything. I don't think that women alone are to blame, but I do think that they have a responsibility to help men recover the assimilated aggressiveness that part of men have lost, perhaps by reciprocating with a civilized no, whatever, to men who approach them in a civilized way. So, basically what he's saying in that last piece is that, men feel like they're approaching women and they're getting not just rejected, but oftentimes humiliated, just for the simple idea of approaching this woman, and for what she might be looking for in a man. He doesn't meet that standards and doesn't meet the standard of what she's looking for, and maybe she humiliates him. This is something that I've heard again, and this is something that you hear oftentimes in the United States as well. So, don't know what you guys thought about this, but I'm going to pick and choose the articles that I'm going to put up. And you'll find that this is not just only men who are talking about this topic. There are women in Brazil who also would co-sign on what these two guys in this particular article were talking about. Even though the last Brazilian election was won by the leftist Lula again, so he's president again in Brazil, it doesn't mean that the country is unified. Brazil is divided in the same way that the United States is, from the transition of power from Trump to Biden. And the same thing happened with Bolsonaro to Lula. uh, Lula just skated by with maybe winning between 0.5% and 1% was his victory over Bolsonaro. So whether he won or not, there are still people, the country is totally divided. Now you have a more liberal president coming in, and there's going to be half of the country who don't support his politics. So it's going to be intriguing to see what goes on in Brazil in the next 4 years. So this is, the first of a number of articles I'm going to be bringing forward, just discussing these dynamics and relationships between Brazilian men and women. So, as more American men travel to Brazil, these are some of the things that people should keep in mind. The type of woman you meet in Brazil is going to depend on what is her ideology, how does she see a relationship with her dealing with a man. I'm going to have some stories coming up where these women talk about the difficulty of being a feminist and dating a man. But that's something I'm going to explore more, because there's so many different pieces to this puzzle to explore to get a full understanding of just where Brazilian women are. So again, don't make the mistake of going out to Brazil and thinking knowing what Brazilian women are like, because everybody's a little bit different, and things are a little bit different now. You might find that traditional type of woman there, but you might not. It just depends on where you're looking, what type of what cities and states are you going to be visiting. But definitely, you just need to be aware that you have women who identify strongly with feminism and others who strongly reject it. So, take your chances, but just understand this is what you're going to be up against. As what would happen with Austin Holloman a couple months back, I don't know, a month and a half, 2 months, I can't remember anymore. But the point is, I don't think he was prepared for that. And so, I'm not telling you, I love visiting Brazil. I've met some great people over the years, but, ideologies often clash. So, just keep this in mind if you plan on taking this trip to Brazil just to meet somebody, okay? So for now, I'm going to end this video here. Definitely, if you like this video, if you learned something, again, these were the opinion of two Brazilian men who posted their opinions of a question posted on Quora. So if you learned something from this, if you like this article, definitely give me a thumbs up, like this video, consider subscribing to the channel, share this video, keep this conversation going. Click on that notification bell. If you think if you've watched any of my videos in the past, you like this video and you're intrigued by any other, material that I might be putting up in the future, definitely subscribe to the channel. And with that said, I'm gonna end this here, and I hope to see you all in my next video.